Hi, Deacon Ed McCormick here for another installment in my series on finding God in a secular age. And last time I spoke about three different dimensions of history in the West as a way of understanding the emergence of our secular age. And I spoke about, first of all, the enchanted age, in which the divine and the secular intersected each other. It was obvious that God was present and active in all things. And then the second stage was this movement in which the divine realm started to get separated from the created realm. Although there were points and places, churches and other places, where the divine touched the secular. And then the final stage, our present stage, in which the divine realm seemed to just disappear, and now all we have is the secular. This is it. This is all there is. And this is not a theory. What I'm describing in these three stages are the assumed way that society in the West imagines things. It's just the take-it-for-granted way that people experience life. And I want to develop this notion of the secular age a little further today. The Canadian philosopher Charles Taylor, whom I'm relying on, speaks about how we live today within an immanent frame. And the image he's using here is that Western cultural experience is framed by an implicit set of assumptions in which everything is immanent. There is no reference to the divine, no reference to the transcendent. This is all there is. And how that developed, how we went from an enchanted world where God was obviously everywhere to this closed off world is a long story, but I want to just highlight a couple of features of that story. Here's the first one. With the emergence of Western society over the last 500 years, you began to get different dimensions of society developing, like the economy, the political sphere. You got the emergence of technology and science, and the emergence of culture. And as these different dimensions of society that we take for granted today begin to emerge, they all are uncoupled from the church and from God. There was a time during the age of enchantment where all of these things were all tied up with God and the church and religion. But they gradually became uncoupled, so that you have an economic sphere, the world of business, the political sphere, the cultural sphere, interpersonal life. And here's what's crucial. As these different dimensions of society developed and uncoupled themselves from God and the church, they developed their own way of explaining how they operate. They could be explained and discussed and understood on their own terms without any reference to God. So if you go to the doctor and he talks about your high blood pressure and your cholesterol, he doesn't have to make any reference to God. If you're talking to your financial advisor, she doesn't have to make any reference to God when she's talking about inflation. And so you can go to a counselor, a psychologist, and he can talk about all kinds of issues you're having without any reference to God. So part of what happens, part of what led to the immanent frame, was this emergence of different spheres of life and society that can be explained on their own terms without reference to God. This doesn't mean that God doesn't exist, that God is inactive. But what happens is our common way of talking about life through scientific terms and economic and political and historical and sociological and psychological all can be done without reference to God or the church. And that can lead you to think that God is therefore absent. There's a second factor, though, because I said you could easily think of the world this way and God could still be active and present, causing all of it. But here's the second factor that happened. There emerged in the West, and I think this is due in part to the church, a shrunken view of God. The biblical view of God, in which God is the creator, who is personal and intimately present, in which the triune God, through the incarnation, through Christ and the Spirit, is present and active, that disappeared and was replaced by this very shrunken view of God as a distant lawmaker, cold and impersonal lawmaker. Or God was shrunken to become this explanation for things that couldn't yet be explained. And neither of those are what Christianity means by God. But when you get that shrunken view of God, along with these different spheres of life that can be explained on their own terms, it seems that God is absent. And you get a flat, impersonal world absent of mystery, absent of wonder, and it's hyper-rational. And this world gets reacted to by the Romantic tradition. And we will get into some of that later. But I wanted to give you a larger understanding of our secular age so that we know what we're dealing with, so that we can adequately respond to it in our attempt to find God in this age. See you in the next video.